A long time ago, not so long if you go by how the crow flies, but a long time ago during the late 60s and 70s, NASA circulated a series of pictures and promoted them as real pictures from outer space. This photo from the Galileo space probe contains a very large discrepancy. The Central American borders, seen here as yellow lines, should fall on land, not water. What we are viewing in this case is the artist's impression of the Earth as if it was holding a baseball-sized moon in its hand. Later, NASA made a movie with a spacewalk theme. In this scene, our attention is immediately drawn to a loose tether, whipping about back and forth and floating upwards, as if the scene was filmed in a swimming pool. After a while, swimming pool guy reaches out and pulls the shadow character up by the hair in front of the camera. After some vigorous interaction between swimming pool guy and the shadow guy, the movie continues in a particular genre of animation known as live action in a cartoon setting. You can see cartoon characters all the way through the spacewalk film. In this case, I've highlighted 3 characters: the guy smoking a pipe, the guy with the big nose, and look in the opposite direction, the mouse face character. Eventually, the center character gets up and floats across the screen. At the historical instant when an American takes his first step into outer space, the film documenting the occasion is filled with a cartoon. It has a boot-shaped nose, pointed ears, and a mustache. For my money, the spitting image of the well-known cartoon animator Walt Disney. Here we have a bird's-eye view of the animation process. All the artist had to do to create the illusion of movement was to erase little pieces of the overlay until gradually the background showed through at the end. The movie is not signed exactly, but the initials WD are presented clearly in the center of the screen in a way that cannot be missed. And our swimming pool character ends up standing with 3 legs on top of a 3-faced Janus-type caricature of the artist. After a while, NASA wanted to make moon landing photos. NASA calls this picture 1140-5862. I call it this guy with a big nose and a mustache, puffing on a cigarette. NASA calls this picture 1140-5866. This is a picture that has received much attention from conspiracy theorists. The reason for the notoriety is it's too lit up. They say the little figure in white should be in shadow, obscured in darkness. The little guy in a top hat, who looks like he's ready to lead a parade, is made up of 2 smaller faces. The guy on the bottom is smoking a cigarette, the guy on top is holding a pipe in his hand. You're already familiar with the guy on the bottom. The guys on top appear to be sharing. The picture is covered in a light haze due to all the smoke from 3 guys smoking. In the end, NASA's entire space program is reduced to a series of animated pictures, heavy on the nose, heavy on the mustache. The picture you're looking at now is quite obviously not a rocket ship on the moon, because a rocket powerful enough to take the LEM from lunar orbit to the surface is powerful enough to blast a crater on the moon big enough to bury the landing module. So if we are not looking at a rocket ship, what are we looking at? Having been down this trail before and knowing the artist's propensity for picture puzzles, the first thing I did after turning the picture over was to make 3 copies of the original and turn them 90 degrees, 90 degrees, and 180 degrees, and reduce the opacity so all 4 layers show. The resultant image, which I assume to be the likeness of the artist in caricature form, is made up of many smaller faces. NASA pictures are drawn with many faces pointing different directions, and the montage can be reassembled to reveal the artist in caricature form, as we just saw. 4 different elements are combined to produce the view you are looking at now. The angle top left, the squiggly line top right, light bottom left, and dark on the bottom right. Then with broad humorous strokes from his brush, the artist merged them together to form a contiguous whole. Consider, if you will, the only source of fire and smoke in this rocket ship picture comes from the 2 guys smoking cigarettes. The smoke rings I added remind me of the hookah smoking caterpillar in Alice in Wonderland. The logo at the top of the page and the big D in the center of the page makes it look a little like the title page to an art collection, with the logo doing double time as M or W, depending on your point of view. Moon creatures manifest themselves differently upside down, and as you can see, exhibit a wide variety of interests. This one is not smoking. While it is true that pictures are not normally viewed upside down or backwards or merged in peculiar ways, it seems to me that NASA itself has shown us by example the value and correct usage of their space pictures when they used this picture in combination with 7 other pictures in the formation of a montage which they included in their catalog of Man on the Moon pictures. You are looking at a photo which NASA placed with the moon landing pictures, but which NASA acknowledges to be an artistic composite. Why they would possibly want to place a composite at the top of their bona fide photographic proof is beyond me, and I cannot see how they used pictures 5863 to 5869 to arrive at this result. On the other hand, many lines are exactly the same as the underlying picture of a Disneyland, and I think the result could be obtained by using the pattern of Disneyland as source material. All things considered, I cannot find a better image to introduce my video of obvious NASA spoofs. Solving for the puzzle, we are immediately greeted by a little character whose basic outline and Mona Lisa smile retains the vestigial remnants of the parent stock. When the opacity of the top layer is reduced, the lines that form the main character merge from both pictures. You may also notice some other interesting faces which I will not go into at this time, being somewhat enamored with the little guy with the Mona Lisa smile we saw at the start. Here's another view of the same subject matter. A close-up view of the little astronaut shows he's not going into or coming out of anything. You can see his head and hands clearly on the other side of the curtain, so we can safely conclude the picture is another NASA spoof. Not to worry that he's forgotten his helmet, it's really just a plastic doll in a tabletop spaceship. Notable artifacts lifted directly from the underlying Disneyland picture include the eye and the cross-hatch pattern that goes to form the ladder. The last thing we'll see is how the purple astronaut-eating monster shows his better side when placed against the Disneyland backdrop. These three pictures appear together serially in the NASA catalog, but they have another relationship to each other and to the underlying Disneyland picture. The first pair of pictures may not appear to have much in common at first, but when I accent the major lines with red ink, you can easily see how the two pictures merge seamlessly to form one picture. Next, I highlighted the face red and the eyes yellow to show how the merger is related to the underlying picture of Disneyland. The merged picture is a key ingredient of the Man on the Moon puzzle, and its proper placement against the Disneyland background forms the first building block in the solution to the puzzle. We solve the puzzle intrinsic to the famous Man on the Moon picture by making 4 copies of the original and moving them up 180, 90 degrees, and 90 degrees. After adjusting for correct opacity, we are immediately rewarded with 2 faces, which I assume to be the likeness of the artist in caricature form. Remarkably, even at this stage, as far removed from the original as it is, you can still see lines and features left over from the original picture of Disneyland. I wanted to take a closer look at the 3 pictures we saw at the beginning of this sequence. For me, it's obvious where the basic pattern for the famous Man on the Moon picture came from. One thing I wanted to draw particular attention to was the little stickman's face. You can see clearly he's got 2 eyes and a nose and a funny little crooked smile. And as it turns out, the little astronaut in the NASA photo has that same little crooked smile. The third picture I used expresses a familiar theme used in these NASA photos, where the central character, I call the mustache man, is surrounded by and composed of opposites, which we see in this case as the little man sitting, the little woman running, the hole with the horizontal stripes, and the rod with vertical stripes. A profile of a man watches from the shadows at the side and is offset by its opposite, a face in full view in the light. Solving for the puzzle, we are immediately rewarded with the face of a man in caricature form, with rough skin but sensitive eyes, the play of opposites still at work. The main face is composed of many smaller faces, as are most of the caricatures in the NASA pictures, showing how the man in the picture is made of many different people, as we all are. In this picture, the artist, he's the mustache guy in the upper left-hand corner with a paintbrush in his hand. The artist has invited us to find the Mickey by connecting all the dots. A mustached man and his faithful companion. Who would have thought? Now I know, as well as anyone, that there must be a million ways to connect all the dots. And there must be a million Mickeys. But that's not the point. The point is the point. Specifically the center graticule, the big crosshair in the center that was used as one of the points to draw the picture. This one is bent. It's quite a mystery as to how it got bent and why we don't see a bent crosshair in all of the other NASA photos. But the artist has provided us with a very simple solution to the mystery. It's the little people. The moon is covered in little people. They get into everything. The crosshair was bent by one of the little people. Now, you may not believe in little people, but if you don't believe in little people, you've got to come up with an alternate solution as to how the center graticule got bent and why it isn't bent in all the other pictures. As for me, this is not a problem because I believe in little people. The moon is covered in little people, and they get into everything. And they bent the crosshair. This is the part where I look at the 5 NASA footprints. They occur together, one right after the other, in the NASA catalog. The first thing of interest is the point on the astronaut's footprint. How a round-toed boot can produce a pointed footprint is beyond me, but it's on all these footprints. The next thing of interest is how sunlight streams across the elevated area in the picture, the foot, and then a shadow forms when the boot ends. Just the opposite is true when sunlight streams across a hole or a depressed area. When sunlight comes to a hole, a shadow forms first, and then sunlight fills in the rest of the hole. In the top picture, we see sunlight streaming across to the end of the elevated area, and then a shadow forms. When light reaches the little hole, a shadow forms first, and then sunlight fills in the rest of the hole. Because the same rules apply to the top and bottom pictures equally, we can easily recognize the 2 little holes to be what they are, little holes. The other 2 areas are raised above the surface. So the top picture cannot be a footprint because footprints are not raised above the surface. They are indented below the surface. That means this picture is another obvious NASA spoof. So if we are not looking at a footprint, what are we looking at? I placed the 5 pictures one on top of another and reduced the opacity of each in turn, as you see here. The result was one picture with 5 different caricatures of a mustached man, which of course I interpret as the artist represented 5 different ways in caricature form. Next, I compared the 5 NASA photos to the underlying picture of Disneyland. Before I go too much further, I wanted to point out some of the little characters the artist left behind. On this page, my favorite is the little mustache guy on the lower right. Here's a photo that rings about a 10 on the spoof meter. It's supposed to be a stereo picture of an astronaut's footprint. But the Hasselblad camera was not a stereo camera. The other thing is the tinting. The left side shows light then dark, and the right side shows dark then light. Such a thing could only be done in a photo lab. I traced the lines on the page and 2 faces appear. You can see how the lines came from the underlying picture of Disneyland. When I take the red lines away, you will see the faces due to what is known as persistence of vision. A well-placed landing module and the ring of meteor craters in a convenient semicircle form the basis for this face, which has its counterpart, of course, in the underlying picture of Disneyland. Is this the picture of an obscure scientific experiment or an action figure about to scoot away on a golf cart? If he is a golfer, it is a strange fairway having certain lines in common with Disneyland. But if you look closely, you will see a bag and a couple of 9-irons in the back of his golf cart. Does this picture really look like an astronaut about to pass in front of the cleft of a rock? Or does it look like a young man and woman caught up in the moment at the entrance to the Tunnel of Love at an amusement park? This pretty young thing loses none of her appeal even with a different background, which the viewer will immediately recognize as a picture of Disneyland. Here's a picture that can be rendered several different ways, but I think we have captured the artist here, attempting one last self-portrait. It is the last portrait, at least in this video, because after this stop, all coaches return to the car barn. NASA pictures represent a genus of artwork unique unto its own, where the artist creates a grand illusion in lines and features apparently lying about randomly on the canvas, but secretly placed with great purpose, so that with some adroit care the image of the artist in caricature form is brought to the light for all to see.